Hello and welcome to Athletic Therapy Now, a podcast for athletic therapists by an athletic therapist. My name is Ashley Burr and I will be your host. Thank you for joining us today. All right, welcome to Athletic Therapy Now, episode 15, Integrating Field and Clinic into Your Practice. We're welcoming Jill Amonte, formerly Reimer.
Yeah.
Jill has graduated from the University of Winnipeg in 2018 and certified as an athletic therapist that same year. Since then, she's been working at Innovative Medical Supplies and practicing in her clinic, in their clinic, Innovative Therapy Solutions. During her years working at this establishment, she has earned a managerial role where she's part of a team that oversees the stores and the clinic. Starting in her second practicum at the University of Winnipeg, she was placed at a local football team and has been honored to work with the team ever since. During her career, she has worked with the provincial football and has dipped into the hockey world with the MMJHL. Jill is currently the president of the MATA, the Manitoba Athletic Therapist Association, and is excited about the opportunity to help move the profession of athletic therapy forward. So, welcome today, Jill.
Thanks for having me, Ashley.
Of course. So the first question that I always start out with everyone is, in one sentence, can you
Mhm.
share your favorite thing about being an athletic therapist?
Oh my goodness, there are many things I love about it. But honestly, I think my favorite part is it's going to be more specific to football, but definitely is relevant in the clinic as well. But um, that moment where somebody feels they have this end of world injury, and you assess them and figure out no, actually, you're okay. We're going to get through this. And just being able to see the relief in their eyes that, well, even in cases where it is a really serious injury, but just the fact that, okay, no, we can figure this out. We can work on it together. And in those cases where, we are able to get them, or I am able to get them back out on the field or in clinic, if it's maybe that discharge moment or something like that. But just that realization that, no, this isn't the end of the world. We're going to work on it together, and we'll take it where we can. Yeah, I just really like that moment personally. Yeah, I find it very, very fulfilling, and it's nice for the other person too, obviously.
Yeah, I agree. It's such a nice moment because you get that that client comes in the clinic. I
Mhm.
get this a lot where they think that the injury is the end of the world. They think they need to
Yeah,
go for an MRI. They're really
yeah.
concerned about it. And you go through the
Mhm.
appointment, you do all your tests, and you finish off, and you're like,
Mhm.
well, it's a sprain,
Yes,
and you're going to be fine in like
we can deal with this.
2 weeks. So you're good. Nothing's broken, and there's always that sigh, and you can see them
Yeah,
just go from this to just
yeah,
that
exactly.
relaxed
And that,
feeling. So
oh, you understand. This is gonna be okay. It's really, yeah, it's
yeah,
great.
that's a really nice moment. That's a good
Yeah.
one. I like that one. I haven't heard that yet.
Oh, thank you.
So the reason I asked you to come on the podcast, actually,
Mhm.
Val from the University of Winnipeg had recommended asking you
Mhm.
because you have made a career out of the combination of clinical and field. And a lot of people think, and a lot of students think, that they have to either work just field or just clinical, and that
Mhm.
you can't do both, and you got to pick one or
Mhm.
the other. And um, I mean, personally, as an AT, I've worked a lot in the clinic, and the clinic is one of my main areas. But I do pick up the odd sporting event here and there.
Mhm.
So with that, you also have you wear a lot of different hats in
I
your
do.
career.
I
Uh,
do.
yeah, can you tell us about each of the unique roles in your athletic therapy career?
Yeah, absolutely. So first I want to make the distinction about not necessarily being able to work both field and clinic, but being able to work both without burning out, with still having a work life balance. And we'll talk a little bit more about that afterwards, of course, but when it comes to my different hats, yes, I think I'm a person who likes to have a lot of things going on. But yeah, I've worked with the Murdoch McKay High School football team since my second year practicum at U of W. So that's like 7 years now, which is crazy. So I started there as a student and then worked my way up as I graduated and became certified. I was able to become the head therapist there, and now I am able to help teach students. So I've primarily had U of W students there, and that's been something that's I've really enjoyed having and kind of taking that turn in the career to no longer like young AT student, but like now I'm able to teach and share my experiences. Um, I've also worked with just about the same amount of time with the provincial football program. Um, that team or those teams as well, I started in my second practicum, and I worked with them until about 2 years ago. So whether that was the U18 football team or the U16s, I traveled with them for multiple years and participated in their summer camps and things like that. Um, and yeah, that was like a crazy, very awesome experience. And then yeah, I've also worked a little bit of hockey. I did about three years with the St. Patelvics in the MMJHL. So those are like 18 to 21 year olds. Yeah, and that was very eventful in terms of injuries. But I loved being able to experience a new sport. Although I grew up with hockey, I never worked it with athletic therapy or very often anyways. So that was a really cool couple years. And then yeah, I'm still working with Murdoch. But as you stated in my bio, like I work at Innovative Medical Supplies. So there we're doing primarily orthopedic bracing, which is super cool. And with the athletic therapy background, it's like a really big leg up when it comes to fitting braces and patient care, because we're already trained in that, right? Like all the anatomical stuff and injuries, and then how to talk to people, how to reassure them, that kind of thing. So that's been really interesting too. And then yeah, I work in their clinic as well. So just lots of things going on, but primarily yeah, I work in the store as a manager, and then I work and manage their clinic. And then I've got Murdoch on the side, and then yeah, this past year, why not? Let's join the MATA board and then be the president. So lots of different things going on.
That's just good for you. Good for you.
Yeah,
How I have a few things to come back to there, but how has being on the MATA board um affected your views on athletic therapy? Is
that
that
is a very good question. That's like a heavy question.
I know, I know. I tried
Yeah.
to keep it a little bit wide open so you can take it how
Yeah.
you want, but
You should have sent me that one first. Just kidding. Um, no, great question. It has been very eye-opening, I would say. Um, I think like as an athletic therapist, I see all these things, and everybody does, but all these things that like, oh, I like this could be better, this could be better. Oh, our funding should be better, or insurance coverage, or like MPI rates, that kind of thing. Um, and they should be, but it's been like very enlightening being on the board, and then president as well. Just seeing like what legwork actually goes into those things, and into improving athletic therapy in general. I think it surprised me how intentional everything we have to do has to be, um, because yeah, we can't like we're a crew of volunteers, so we can't take on everything, and but everything we do has to help our membership and help athletic therapy. So I found that being part of the board, I feel like I have so much more pride and like ownership of athletic therapy, like in my heart. um, yeah, that I just yeah, it's something like I think I always want to work towards, like, whether it's on the board or not, I want to keep helping in this regard. Uh because there's so much we can do, and there's I don't know, I think it's like a very beautiful profession, to be honest. Because we can do so many things, we can help so many people, and we're like I s- I don't know, I think I just feel like we're such an untapped resource. So I hold AT very close to my heart. So I think just being part of the board has like really reinforced that. Um, and yeah, honestly, I'm just really excited to see like what we can do, how we can help, and how we can move forward.
Yeah, that's I kind of expected you to say something along those lines because
Yeah.
I feel like you don't know until you know.
Yeah, exactly.
And we're very lucky here in Manitoba to have such a great and such a supportive association. Uh,
Yeah,
like
we are. We really
I I did not realize how great our association was until listening to some of the other CATA meetings.
Mhm.
And really, I think it's just about our numbers and how our
Yeah.
numbers are so close. And we
Mhm.
have people that are very passionate. And I mean, there's a lot that goes into that. But
Yeah.
yeah, so thank you for everything you do because
You're welcome, no problem.
I think having that that MATA um, has been so helpful. I mean, I know for me it has been,
Mhm.
and for a lot of other people out there, it's great. So thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Um, so one of the things that you said there was, being in the clinic, having that stepping stone of being an AT is has been super important for being able to do the bracing at IMS,
Mhm.
because you need to be able to talk to people,
Mhm.
and it's so funny that that is the thing, right? Like
Mhm.
athletic therapists are we learn how to talk to people
Yeah.
throughout our education and throughout our practicum placements, and that's honestly I think the biggest part of a practicum is getting
Mhm.
that exposure.
Yeah.
And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's not a lot of other professions that put their students into that integrated of a practicum placement for
Mhm.
so long. I know when
Yeah.
I did it, it was 1,200 hours
Mhm.
and then some, because 1,200 hours, even though that was the mandate, it wasn't enough.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Um, and you say we need to be able to talk to, yeah, to people. My husband always laughs, but like even learning how to write an email, people don't know how to
Mhm.
write emails. People don't know how to talk to people, and it is really a
Yeah.
learned skill.
Yeah, for
So,
sure. Yeah, and I think there's like a very distinctive AT personality too. Like you can know kind of right away if or not, you won't know if they are an athletic therapist, but you know if someone is an athletic therapist, they'll have these skills.
hmm,
Which is pretty cool. Something we
yeah,
can be proud about.
yeah, that empathy side of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so my next question is that athletic therapists often think that they have to do either clinic or
Mhm.
field. And this kind of goes into your talking about without burning out.
Mhm.
Why did you decide to partake and work both field and clinic? And how do you manage both roles at the same time?
Um, yeah, so I decided to do both. Um, you know what? It wasn't really even a decision. It was just like this is how it is. In a good way. So when I started working football, I knew very quickly that I loved it. And that I'd be sticking around there. But you always get that, well, can I make a job out of this? Um, or I wish I could, but that's not realistic, or kind of those things. And then, of course, I love working in clinic, but I find like I do have trouble if it's like a whole day. Like I love like the part time clinic. As we mentioned, I like doing a lot of different things. So I do like kind of the switch up and working in the different areas. So I love working clinic, but realized I didn't want to do that full time. And I knew that field, unless that is your full time job, most likely would not be a full time job. So it was kind of a natural integration of the two. I have been very fortunate with my work and with the team that I work with, that they are able to work together. Um, or they don't work together, but they work with me.
Yep, I got you.
um,
I'm hearing what
yeah,
you're saying.
exactly. Yeah, so I have been able to balance both. And that would be kind of my first piece of advice for anyone wanting to work in both areas is that like you do need to work somewhere where you can balance the two. If you're doing your own clinic practice, like you can make your own hours, right? Or if you're working in someone else's clinic, like yeah, maybe you can tone down your hours during football season, so you're not working 12, 14-hour days. Um,
Which
so
I
that
think that, sorry to interrupt. I think
no,
that's
that's
actually kind of a nice way to be able to highlight yourself in a job interview is saying like,
mhm,
"Hey, is like if I take this position, are you okay if I go and I work out in the community to
mhm.
represent my name and the clinic's name, and pulling clients into the clinic from that field
Yeah,
position?"
absolutely.
I mean, what clinic owner would say no to that?
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a great way to put it too. Um, yeah, and I do that, and I never really thought of it that way either. But in an interview or when you're working through your job, absolutely, like that is a huge asset. Even like meeting parents and things like that. Like people like to go to a familiar face, right? So that's huge. Um, and then, but the second thing too would be um, working with a team that is also willing to pay you as a job. And I know this is a lot more common now, which is really great. That's a huge with like the events that Mata arranges, and I know there's a couple organizations that work like in the football leagues. I'm not aware of any in any other sports, but different organizations that will like a third party person trying to place people with teams, and you can get paid that hourly rate. Um, so that's kind of the other big piece, right? Is working with a team that will reimburse you for your time. And this, like I said, is not always the case, but I think it's very important that if there is like a freebie year or a year where like maybe you're not being compensated for all your time, that is like a very big rapport building year. And I think it is very important that it stops after 1 year. Like if it's not going the way it needs to go, then maybe it is time to move on. Um, I find that for athletic therapists, like we are, I think for anybody, but we are our biggest advocates. And I know my frustrations working um, with different teams has been like if I've stood up for myself and said like, no, like this is the going rate for an athletic therapist. Um, like I have been told like, I'm sorry, you just asked yourself out of a job. Like I've been told that because unfortunately someone will do it for cheaper or for free just to get the experience. So I think it is important that we ask, and I think it is important that sometimes we do need to kind of carve our own space. But I think it's also critical that the carving stops and that we need to like regroup, realize like, no, I am an athletic therapist. If this is not working out, then yes, we'll move on. Um, yeah, just it always comes down to, yeah, I think building rapport is massive and then asserting yourself because a lot of the time, forgive me if I'm rambling, but if sometimes you do need to show your worth to the team or the organization, and they need to, yeah, unfortunately sometimes they need to be introduced to how valuable we are, and that's okay, and that's what we're there for a lot of the times. Like, Rome wasn't built in a day, if I can say that. But it is work, and it's something that we need to strive for. And yeah, we need to stand up for ourselves about it. So those two things, like finding a clinic that can work with you and a team that can work with you, are the biggest things for not burning out. Um, because if you're working your full-time job and then you're also working like hockey, for example, is 4 nights a week, 6 hours probably, like 2 games, 2 practices. Um, 6 hours for games, okay, and then a couple hours for practices. That's just not sustainable, like, at all. And then same thing with football too. Like, football's every day. If you're at practices, you're there 5 times a week. And I don't know, I would not be happy if I was running back to clinic after football practice or after a football game, because I'd lost out on those hours, right? So unfortunately, I think the biggest thing to avoiding burnout is pay, but also like listening to your body and finding that balance too of what you can do and what you maybe need to step away from.
Yeah, and I love that. So there's a lot of things there that I want to kind of pull from.
Yes.
And I mean one of them is finding a team
Mhm.
that will pay you. And I think there
Mhm.
was a shift probably 2016. It was the year that I had my son because I stopped working football for a couple
Yes.
years there. And I remember Val coming up to me at an MATA meeting and she was like, "Ashley, we've struck a deal. We're gonna get paid for football now."
Yeah,
And I
we've
was
done
like,
it.
but I'm done.
Oh, no.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm stopping now." And I think that was the shift because prior to that, it
Mhm.
was and obviously there's more than just like that 1 second incident that shifted the way that we're thought of in Manitoba.
Yeah.
But at that point, that's where we started to see more paid opportunities
Mhm.
for certified athletic therapists because
Yeah.
prior to that, it was all for students.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it was like, I mean, $14 an hour at the time
Yeah.
was a little bit higher than minimum wage.
Mhm.
And that was acceptable.
Yeah.
And I'm using little quotation marks here for that.
Mhm.
And now, I mean, in Manitoba, it's different across provinces. And I'm saying that
Mhm.
because there's people who listen to this that aren't just in Manitoba.
Yeah, for
But in
sure.
Manitoba, it's common to have that $35 an hour rate, which
Mhm.
I think does need to increase, but we also can't
Mhm.
go from nothing
Yeah,
to the rate that we want to be paid. But
absolutely.
everybody kind of bases it off of that football rate. That's what
Mhm.
everything is. That's what that $35 an hour rate is based off of um, for other sports. And I
Mhm.
think that's because of what MATA had put in place, which is fantastic.
Mhm.
And I'm rambling now because I forgot where I was pulling this from.
Oh,
Oh,
no, that's okay.
the stand up for yourself. So
Yeah.
absolutely we need to stand up for ourselves. And I mean, if somebody's not willing to pay for your
Mhm.
time, is it worth it? We
Yeah.
say that it's worth the experience and we need it for the experience, but is it really worth it for
Mhm.
you? Because
Yeah.
if somebody isn't willing to take you seriously and they're not willing to pay you
Mhm.
for the work that you're doing, then you don't need that person as a
Mhm.
client or that team as a client. It's the
Yeah.
same thing in clinic, right? If somebody
Yeah.
comes up and they're like, "Well, can I get a discount?"
Yeah.
Well, like, no,
Yeah.
because I work hard
Yeah.
and this
Yeah.
is my job. And as an AT, we're not paying some huge company when somebody comes in. Like,
Yeah.
athletic
It's
therapists
going to
aren't,
you.
yeah, we're not millionaires that are just like
Mhm.
putting the money away and buying some crazy vehicle over and over again, right? It's
Yeah,
money
for
that
sure.
goes to us, and then we take that money and we buy food with it. Like,
Yes.
we're not doing extravagant things, right?
Mhm.
It's not like if you go to, I don't know, a car dealership and you're like, "Hey, can I buy this $80,000 car?"
Yeah.
and get a discount,
Yeah. No, that's
that doesn't affect the person that you're buying it from as much, right? So,
yeah, exactly.
I do think that we need to stand up for ourselves more. And um, yes, I think that there's a point where we can build that rapport, but I also think that it's important to stand our ground, because if we keep
Mhm.
saying yes to jobs that are free,
Yeah,
um, then we're not going to be able to progress what athletic therapy is. And there's a difference
absolutely.
between, um, I'm going to volunteer for this opportunity because it's
Yeah,
for a good cause
absolutely. I was
and
just
it's
gonna
a
say
one
that
time
actually.
thing,
Yeah.
versus I'm going to spend, okay, if you're at football 5 days a week, you've got, let's
Mhm.
say, 8 hours for game day, because
Mhm.
that's a thing.
Yeah.
When I was a student, I was working 8 hours for game days and then
Mhm.
3 hours for practices.
Yeah.
So, what's my math? So, like,
Mm,
you're there 20 hours a week, right? Like,
yeah, like
you're
at
there
least.
20 hour. Yeah, you got to
Yeah.
get paid for that.
Yeah.
Nobody should be doing that for nothing, right? At
Mhm.
this point, when
Yeah.
it's where we are. Sorry, now I am rambling on this. Um,
You're good, you're good.
yeah, I always say, like, it's important to show value,
Mhm.
but once you've shown your value,
Yeah.
then you step back and you say, no, 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 you need to pay
Yeah,
me for this now.
absolutely.
Um, and then how do you feel about that?
No, I
Like,
100% agree. I 100% agree.
yeah,
Yeah, and like you said, yeah, like you took the words right out of my mouth. There's a huge difference between volunteering and then there's a huge difference between doing your job and not being paid for it.
yeah,
So, yeah, I think that's a huge distinction that's gotten very blurred and I think gets very blurred with like coaching staff coaching because they love the game versus like no, like we're a hired medical staff. It's different. Um, and I think that conversation is always very hard. But yeah, no, you're totally on point.
yeah. Like, I think that you're right. It is a blurry line because the coaching staff doesn't usually get paid for football, and I think that can be a hard
Mhm.
conversation to have. But when you really break it down and say, no, 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 you have a job. You do this
Mhm.
for fun.
Mhm.
This is my job.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely.
Like, they need to see that and they need to understand that. I love football. I love working with my team,
Mhm.
but I'm not standing on the side in the rain because I like it that
No.
much.
No. Not when it's raining. When it's
No.
sunny, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um and then one of the other things he had said was, getting that face to face with players and parents, and I think that that's so important. And I did a podcast with Nikki Smith a while back,
Mhm.
about I think it was called the ripple effect,
Mm.
and it's essentially like those referrals that you get. And I know in my clinic practice, I can trace most of my clients back to, a lot of the things that I did as a student, so
Oh, that's pretty
either
cool.
football or I coached gymnastics for a really long time as well.
Nice.
And I would say a good 75% of my clients that I see now, the initial referral was from something I did as a student,
Wow.
which is super, super cool to see that if I trace that web back there. And
Yeah,
so,
that's huge.
mhm. And when I first started out as a certified, a lot of my clients were the parents of the football players or parents of the athletes at gymnastics.
Mhm. Absolutely.
And so you build that up and you create those relationships and they trust you. I have,
Yeah.
entire families that come in and they'll bring their kids to see me because we've built that relationship and that trust over the last 10 years. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I think
Absolutely.
that's super important. There's nothing I d- I spent from 2010 till 2016, I volunteered working football.
Wow.
So I didn't like by any means just say like, no, pay me or I'm gone.
Yeah, no. And it's hard too, like, don't get me wrong, like, these it's not like done, done, done. Like, it's all very hard, and it's not as straightforward as
Hmm.
these, numbered points that I have on my screen, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's all and, like, you learn to love those the team, you learn to love the staff. Like, I know for me, like when I had that conversation and I was like bluntly shot down, I stayed for a couple more years. Like it's not black and white, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It is hard, right? And it's do I
Mhm.
need that experience or not? And
Yeah.
that's a hard thing, and you have to decide that for yourself.
Mhm.
But I think the MATA has done a really good job at opening that up for us and finding opportunities to create paid field work in Manitoba, and they've made it really easy to follow that. Right? It's
Mhm.
Bruce and prior to that, Lee would send out an email on a regular basis of here's what's coming
Mhm.
up in the next month. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
take your pick, and first person to email back gets the job, and that's great.
Yeah.
One of the other ones that's starting up is on-field therapy. I don't know if you're
Mm.
familiar with them. They're based out of Ontario. Paj actually went to the University of Winnipeg, and so she started on-field therapy about 6 months ago. And
Oh,
it's just an app. It's mostly in Ontario, but you can sign up in Manitoba and across Canada. And teams can sign up to put their posting on the app, and then therapists can sign up. And then instead of where it's MATA, where it's funneled through there,
yeah.
which I like because then I don't have to deal with the financial side of it. It's already
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
The on-field therapy, it's just
Mm.
like a job application area, right? So you click on the
Interesting.
team and you say, "Hey, I'm interested in working your event. Tell me about what you're looking for." And then
Yeah.
you negotiate your rate and you deal with everything else after that with the team on your own.
Oh, that's
So
pretty
it's
cool. So
it's
it's
a
like a
yeah.
little matchmaker. That's
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. Yeah, it's a little matchmaker of athletic therapy.
Yes.
Um, I just did a podcast with Paj about it. So if you're
Mm.
interested in hearing more about that, you can go back. You and whoever's listening can go back on, I think it's episode 14
Yeah,
of
it'll be
Athletic
listening
Therapy now. So
for sure.
yeah, um, that was good. I like that question there. That was good. So, just to kind of finish this up, what's one piece of advice that you would tell students or new therapists as they try to find their place in the athletic therapy world? And it cannot be something that you already said.
Oh no. Um, honestly, I would say try everything. Don't be afraid to apply for the job. Um, like shoot your shot, honestly. I found that that's something like for me, I've like regretted. I've seen job postings or yeah, I guess mostly job postings where I think like, oh man, like I don't think I would be qualified for that, but I would love it. And then I see one of my peers get the job. It's like, "Oh my gosh, we're the same. I could have done that. That's awesome." And I'm obviously so happy for them. And then I'm like, "Oh my gosh, Jill, come on. You could have done it." So that would be my main thing like when it comes to figuring out who you are as an AT. You don't know until you know. I would have had no idea that I liked football until I was like asked by a friend to work football. So I didn't even know really Winnipeg had a football community until then. So
Such a
which
huge
is
community.
crazy. Yeah, it's huge, and I had no clue. Um, yeah, so you just gotta try stuff and as much as you can, like if people ask you, like if you want to cover an event, obviously within reason and have your like criteria of what you should and should not be working based on kind of what we've talked about. But as much as you can, try new things. I've worked like randomly. I'm sure you have too, Ashley, but like horseback riding events and like I don't know. I can't think of anything out there right now, but just try everything. And then just touching back on something we did talk about is just also like listen to your body. Like you need to listen. You only have one body. And yeah, you can't overstretch yourself. I think coming out of university, we're so used to being way overstretched and just being so tired. And on one hand, like it's kind of a blessing because you can kind of keep grinding like that, which is great for taking new opportunities and learning more and all of those great things. But at the same time, like it's not sustainable, and you do need to have a life. That's very important, and you do need to be healthy and take care of yourself. So as much as it as much as it is easy to just kind of keep going, 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 and working your 9 to 5, and then going to your hockey game, and then coming home and doing it all again. Um, yeah, balance is very important. So that would be my biggest advice.
Yeah, love that. Try everything. What's the
Yeah.
Wayne Gretzky quote? You
Well,
miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
exactly, the Wayne Gretzky, Michael Scott quote, yes.
Yeah, yeah. So if somebody wants to reach out to you, how can they reach out to
Mhm.
you?
Oh, they are welcome to email me. Um, I don't know, should I say my email?
Yeah, you can
Okay.
say
My
it.
email is K Jill Reimer. Reimer is Reimer at outlook.com. That's my maiden name, but my married name is different. Or you can message me on Instagram. That's totally fine. Um, what's my Instagram? It's just at Jill Reimer. Simple.
Yeah,
So
and
pretty straightforward.
I'll link those in the show notes as well,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that
Perfect.
you can
Yeah.
hop on there.
Happy to talk
Yeah,
to anybody.
yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
I'm laughing there because I remember when I changed my name, it was
Mhm.
so frustrating to go
Yeah.
through and change everything that you have to
Everything.
change.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh. Yeah,
yeah.
it's true.
Like, how are people gonna
Yeah.
find me now?
I know, they'll never know. And so far, we don't even have our marriage license yet, so it's like no official changes. It's just me saying it.
There you go.
But
That's okay.
it will come. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna recap that. So our first question was, can you tell us a little bit about the some of the unique roles in your athletic therapy career? And you talked about how you've worked with and you continue to work with Murdoch football team. And that was kind of a cool one because you started as a student and managed to, over the last 7 years, work your way up to that head therapist. And so during the season, you're there 5 days a week, 4 or 5 days a week, depending on your team.
Mhm.
And then in that time period, you also worked with the provincial football again starting as a student, and then you did some spent some time in hockey, and then you also are in clinic. I have new glasses, so I'm trying to read my notes, but
Oh,
they're,
no.
you
They're
know,
moving.
yeah. um so you're in the clinic and at IMS, and
Mhm.
through that you've really learned and used your skills as an athletic therapist to learn about bracing the clients that come into IMS.
Mhm.
And we talked about how athletic therapy just has this great way of talking to people and talking with people and explaining to them how to do things and how to use their brace.
Mhm.
So we're kind of perfect for that position.
Yeah.
And then you are also with the MATA. You are president of the MATA right now. And then I caught you off guard with a question about that and how that's changed your perspective on athletic therapy. And, you felt that it was eye opening and enlightening, and just the surprise of what goes into being on the board and working with the MATA to help to progress athletic therapy in Manitoba and across Canada. And because of that, it's given you a whole new level of pride and ownership for being an athletic therapist.
Mhm.
And it's important that we remember that, and I'm adding this part, and it's not my recap, but
Yeah.
we don't necessarily see everything behind the books. And so taking that time to understand what the association is doing and all the work that they have to do is super important to understanding who we are as athletic therapists.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, and and I mean that goes across with anywhere you go. Understanding the other side of it is really important. And you talked about how athletic therapy is really an untapped resource, and I totally agree with that
Mhm.
because it really is. And I think that, a whole other conversation, but people don't understand how helpful athletic therapy can be in prevention and care.
Yes.
of our lives, right? I
Yes,
still have
mhm.
people coming up and being like, "But I thought I had to be an athlete."
Yeah.
Not going to get into that because that's a
No,
whole other
it's a
conversation.
whole other thing. Yeah, exactly.
Um, and then when we talked about, clinic versus field, your biggest thing was that you really like the switch between having your clinic hat on and then having your field hat on.
Yeah.
Um, and how you knew that you couldn't have field as a full-time job, or there weren't a lot of field opportunities that are a full-time job where you
Mhm.
can also stay where you are, right? So
Yeah.
finding a balance between the two of them and getting there is by getting to that balance. You really have to find a team that's going to pay you,
Mhm.
and works within a reasonable hour, and
Yeah.
then hour, I'm meaning like, consistently around the same time. Like football's
Yeah.
always after school or on
Yeah.
weekends, right? And then a clinic that is happy to have you out in the community and is happy to have you vary your hours so that you can follow through with your field commitments, which, if we outline that in a job interview, is actually really
Mhm.
good for the clinic we're working at. So it's kind of a
Yeah.
highlight. And then making sure that you're not going to burn out,
Mhm.
because burnout is real and it's a big thing. And if you're working, full time as an AT in the clinic, and then you're working almost full time as an AT in the field, that doesn't leave a lot of
Mhm.
time for life, and that's not sustainable. So finding a sustainable relationship between those two
Yeah.
hats,
Yeah.
and then remembering that our time is worth something. And so,
Mhm.
yes, we can take the time to volunteer and build a rapport, but you have to find what your boundaries are,
Mhm.
because it's important that you get paid for doing your job, because we
Yes,
don't just have money sprouting from trees.
this is true.
Um, and then your advice was try everything, don't be afraid, and just apply for the job,
Mhm.
because you don't know. You
True.
don't know where you're going to find yourself in 5 years, and maybe you think you're not qualified, but really you are. So,
Yeah, exactly.
anything to add to that?
I don't think so. I think you got it pretty good. Yeah. You know what? Okay, actually one little thing. Um, I would just say, like, when developing your boundaries and, like, building rapport with the team, I think there is a lot of room for compromise. Um, and there's a lot yeah, compromise is the word I'm looking for. There's, like, for example, like, okay, maybe they can't pay you to be there every single day, but they can pay you for game days. Okay, then maybe you're just there game days. Um, is that the best? No. Obviously, we would love to be there every single day, but you know what? If that's what you need to do for now, and then they realize, like, oh, hey, no, we do need somebody throughout the week, then amazing. Next year, there can be that change. But I think we do need to be very open to flexing, but not flexing our worth and value.
Yes, yes. Sorry, maybe there's some, like, when I work football, I work with one team the entire season, but I only do
Mhm.
games.
Yeah, yeah.
And I do last year I just did, the MATA recommends a minimum of 30 minutes before, right? So last year it
Hmm.
was just the 30 minutes, and this year the team was kind of like, you know what? We want you for longer. We don't
Hmm.
want to have to be stressed about it. We don't want to have to lose out on having players who are starting because they forget to get taped until the end. So, like,
Yeah.
we'll just, come, and it changes every time, right? But they obviously see that value in
Hmm.
having a certified athletic therapist there to tape prior to a game. And maybe not for practices. I never had that conversation. But always something that's there. And you, I don't know if it was you that said this at one of the MATA meetings, but um, the MATA has, and please correct me if I'm wrong on this, has all of these contracts with all of these different teams, whether it's football or another sport. And they're happy for athletic therapists. If you build a relationship with a team, like,
Hmm.
just take that on. You can take that off of the MATA's plate
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
build that yourself
Mhm.
because the MATA is just there to try and siphon it and try and build the name within the community.
Yeah,
And so if we can take that off the plate of the MATA, then they're happy. Am I
yeah,
right with that? Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. That's like best case scenario.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, like you said, it looks different for everybody, and there's a lot of compromise that's available there. And if a team doesn't want you
Mhm.
full time, that's cool. Games are
Yeah,
great.
yeah, totally fine. But that doesn't mean you're there for free either. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast today. It was great to have you and to hear a little bit more about the how to work field and clinic together. And if anybody has any questions, you can always shoot me a message, and maybe we'll have Jill back on again.
Amazing. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.